He meets Bethuel, who's the father there, and then Laban, Rebekah's sister. And through the providence of how he arranges at the well, and he meets a young woman that'll give him and his camels water. He had prayed that God would show him this and direct this young girl there. He meets Rebekah's family, goes back and to the house, and he tells them what his mission is. I need to find this woman, take her back to my master's house so he can marry my master's son. She can marry my master's son, and so forth. And so he brings out the jewelry, the nose rings, all that stuff to impress the girl. And so they ate, and he says, I need to take her and leave in the morning. I want to get right back. And her brother and mother said, no, let her stay with us a few days, maybe 10, and then she can go. And he said, don't hinder me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so I may go to my master. And they said, well, we'll call the young woman, ask her personally. And so they called Rebekah to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. I said that's because her brother Laban was there and she wanted to get away from her brother Laban, as we're going to see later on. Maybe that was true. Laban is a shrewd character. I don't think he's all on the up and up. But that could be just my reading of the text impressions. I don't think this servant wanted to dilly-dally about this, to use a technical Greek term, dilly-dally about it, because I think he was afraid things would go badly, things would go wrong. It doesn't say that, but I think he wanted to get this done, get his business accomplished, and go back, because too many things, there was too much to go wrong all the way in this whole endeavor. To go that far away to a strange place in a strange land, meet these people he doesn't know, and bring this young woman back. And so he wants to get the job done. Sometimes in life we're better to just go ahead and not hesitate about what we need to do and just get the job done. You know? And we think if we can wait, we'll foresee all the bad circumstances and nothing bad will happen. I'm old enough to tell you, maybe it's just my calamity of a life, that that's not how it works. Something bad can happen. I don't care how long you stew about it. You can stew about decisions and delay and put things off for as long as you want, and something bad still can happen. Because that's just the nature. There's no decision you can make that doesn't have bad consequences to it, necessarily. The question is, are the consequences that are bad better than the ones that are good? Or worse? Or are they less? That's the question. And so he wants to get this done. He's correct. So this young woman says, I'm going to go. So right away then, they stuck to their word, and she wanted to go. I think this is remarkable, don't you? That Rebekah said, I will go. This is remarkable. It's providential. It tells you something about her. We can read into it, maybe wrongly. Just keep what you read into it like that. Keep it at a level where you realize it's just what you think and you can change your mind about it. But she seems like a pretty adventurous woman. She's not at all hesitant and afraid. And yet her husband, Isaac, is somewhat hesitant and afraid. That's why they matched up with each other, partly. That was God's matching up. But that's how it matches up. And that's for the best. That's good. But she's not at all hesitant and afraid. I think she's very confident in herself. You see this later when she proposes that her son Jacob pretend to be his brother and fool the husband. You see her later in life. She's very decisive about things and thinks she can pull it off. And in that case, she pulled off something that led to her hurt. But maybe it was for God's benefit. So they sent her away. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. That became true. She became the mother of one of the mothers of the nation of Israel, and so forth. Yes, sir.
the I will go is equivalent to I do.
Yes, I do, in a sense. She committed herself to this man she hadn't seen before.
I wanted to make a couple points here, some trivia here. And then I want to ask the general...
Are there prizes for trivia? I mean, go ahead. Okay, all right.
All right, so, and what I'm about to say will probably give you the answer to one of the the prayer of Eliezer asking God for someone else is the first time this occurs in the Bible. When he asks, guidance for Abraham to find a bride for Abraham's son. That's the first time there's a prayer in the Bible where someone is asking for someone else's benefit.
Not for their own benefit. All right.
And
Okay.
after, when God answers, he gives a prayer of thanks.
So this is actually what we would call a supplication, asking for someone else's benefit, for something for someone else.
The other thing is in verse 16, and the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her. There's two Hebrew words for virgin. Oh, actually, there's no Hebrew word. There's two Hebrew words for young woman. This is one of them. It's Alma. It's also the same word they use for the Virgin Mary.
Well, it's what Isaiah promised a virgin would conceive and bear a son. That's the word that's used.
Yeah.
And people want to say it just means a young woman, but it doesn't
But
mean
here
that.
it specifically says Rebecca had never known man.
Right. So it defines it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people say, who try to, disprove the Bible.
Well, it's interesting that...
She wasn't a virgin. Just
Right.
like she's...
But it says that about Mary too, exactly. But the interesting thing is Isaiah, we're going to get way off track here, is he says, I'm going to give you a sign. A young woman will conceive and bear a child. Well, what kind of sign is it when a normal young woman conceives and bears a child? That's what they do. Okay? It's not a sign of anything. But a virgin, that's a whole different matter, you see. So yes, that is the same word, and it defines it here for you as one who has not known a man. And that was assumed that when they said young woman, meaning unmarried woman, that she had not known a man. In the general usage, that was kind of assumed that that'd be the case. But it isn't, in our day, assumed at all. In fact, you'd be wrong if you assumed it. Okay, that a young woman who's not had sex.
Questions that I was going to ask, and I think this is something that everyone should ask themselves. Where are we in this story? Who is that we should be like in this story?
Where are we in this story? You mean individually?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, as far as the descendants, we are descendants of this promise that God would bring a fruitful nation of people through Rebekah. And that includes Christians in this case, as we know from the New Testament. I don't know if that's what you're getting at.
No, I'm getting at two things here. Who are the nice people here? Who are the good people
Who are the good people here?
in this story? I mean, obviously they're good.
Well, Eleazar is the first one that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
He's seeking God's will and seeking to please his master.
Please his master, and that's what we should do.
Right. And that's a characteristic of Eleazar every time we meet him in the Bible. He's serving Abraham faithfully.
And we should be thankful. He was thankful.
Right. He was grateful. He could see God's providence in the things that happened, and he was willing to see the providence of God in the things that happened to him. And what?
Who's the other person?
I suppose Rebekah, that when she realized what she ought to do, she did it,
Kindness to
even though she didn't know how it was all going to turn out.
kindness to a stranger.
Yes, and that's the sign. You asked before, how did he find this woman? Well, he found her by setting up the test that would reveal her character, show what kind of character that she had. She was a She was a worker, yeah, and that's it. She was willing to go and do this hard work, and when she was doing the work, she thought about how she could help other people with it. There's a lot to be said. I acted like I was seeing something, well, I didn't act like it. I was seeing the negative side of Rebecca's personality here. But there's a lot to be said for this woman, much to be said for her. That she was not just a passive little Instagram princess, you know, who was dependent on everybody else to do everything for her. She was the special one. And she very much may have been the special one in this family. If she's this kind of young lady, I almost guarantee you she was a special one in this family. You know, because she was willing to work and do stuff for other people, and she took charge of things, a lot of responsibility, and she had a good head on her shoulders. She knew how to make decisions. So this is a remarkable young lady here, and that's the kind of woman you should be looking for if you want to mate, not a little Instagram princess who looks pretty, knows how to wear makeup, and can't get her little Prada shoes dirty. You need to be looking for a different kind of woman if you want to find. And then more on a more basic level, that I think she realized that this was the will of God, in the sense that this man come and said, this Jehovah's servant Abraham has sent me, and I came with prayer for this God of Abraham which you worship, and he picked you out. I think she realized that was her calling, as it were, to do this. So don't mistake the personalities going on here with the fact this is a good woman. You know, I had aunts, and I have so many aunts and all my grandmothers and everything, but I had an aunt, Isla Mae, from Kentucky. Big woman, loud, but man, was she a worker. I remember falling once I was about 4 or 5 years old, 5 years old maybe. I was running, I tripped, as usual, went flying head first in the living room there, and she happened to be visiting from Kentucky, and I smashed my head against a table, you know, and I was probably wailing and all that. She came over and picked me up, dusted me off, said, "You're okay, boy, you're fine. You just rub it a little bit and go on play." You know, now that's a woman. Okay, no ER visits, no concussion checks. She wanted me to be a boy. She wanted me to be a man, and she was just a strong person. And she was take charge of. When she came from Kentucky, she tried to take charge of everything. Caused a little bit of friction, because 2 women can't exist in the same kitchen. That's a known law of physics. But anyway, she tried it. But that's the kind of women I grew up around, and not a bunch of sissies. And I appreciate that so much. All right. What's that?
They can't in mine.
They can't what?
They can't. I have no problem letting anybody else have
The kitchen?
kitchens.
Okay, gets that.
It's not a problem.
Okay. I sort of believe you. I sort of believe you. It depends on how you define it. Anyway, the point being, then they prophesied about her. They don't know it's a prophecy, but it's recorded because it is a prophecy. It has come true. That her descendants would be tens of 10,000s of 10,000s and so forth. And they sent her away, never to see her again. There's no record that they ever saw her again. So, well, is that right or not? I say that now, I might be wrong about that. No, Jacob goes back and meets Laban, but she doesn't go back. Okay. All right. Then Rebekah and her maids arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man, and so the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac came from the way of Beer Lahai, where he dwelt in the south. That's the south end of Canaan, not Mississippi. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field in the evening. He lifted up his... That's one of the few usages where meditate in the Bible. This is the first usage of it. It basically means to think on the Word of God, not say Om and try to get in touch with the universe. It's an interesting word to look up. But then he lifted up his eyes and looked, and there were camels coming. And then Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel. Now in the King James, I think it says she lit off her camel, and this is the first instance of smoking in the Bible. if you know what Camel cigarettes are, if you're old enough to know what. That's what my grandfather, my uncle smoked Camels, my grandfather smoked Lucky Strikes. Huh?
She jumped off the camel. That's what lighted.
She lit off? Well, that's, apparently it's smoking.
She lighted. The carriage, in old story English, she lighted
Well,
the carriage.
There's motorcycles in the Bible because David's triumph was heard throughout all Jerusalem, it says. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
Should I keep telling Bible jokes? There's a lot of these little Judy's shaking her because she knows a few of them. Anyway. What's the smallest sin in the Bible? Flee fornication, it says. Anyway, think about that one. The Bible says flee fornication. That's the smallest sin in the Bible. I knew you wouldn't get it. You all are too nice for those kind of jokes. All right, Genesis 24. And so she gets off her camel. She sees this man here, and she realizes, I imagine that's my master. Just the way he was dressed, the way people that were with him. And she said to the servant, who is this man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, this is my master. So she took a veil and covered herself, which was common of a custom of modesty. And the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So he met this stranger, and he loved her. It's more than just more than a romantic feeling. It means he took care of her, and so forth, and she became his wife. So a lot in those verses there. The idea in modern people that you have to have a long courtship of several years and live together for a long time before you can figure out if you need to be a husband or wife just isn't true. It's counterproductive. Evidence now says that people who do that have a much less success of marriage rate than people who go into marriage not having had sex with each other before. And then the idea that you can never be happy in an arranged marriage. That isn't true either. People were happy in arranged marriages. They were just as happy, percentage-wise, as they are with people choosing their own mates. People, these arranged marriages are terrible. Well, how well are we doing right now? Are we doing well right now with letting us pick our own mates, letting teenagers commit fornication and pick their own mates? I don't think it's doing very well. So, arranged marriages work fine. Were there injustices? Yes. Were some people unhappy? Of course. What's true today? Well, the same thing is true today. It's not any different. People thought when they read romantic stories like Romeo and Juliet that if we could all just pick our own mates, everybody would be happy. As they say, how's that working out for you? So then after this, after he gets, yeah, Ken.
The veil thing.
Yeah, all right.
That tradition changed, wearing the veil. Guess when? For the Jews.
What, after Christ?
No.
No, before that time? Esther? I'm guessing.
Leah and Rachel.
Oh, yeah, okay. Leah and Rachel have
After
changed.
that, the bride was forbidden to wear a veil.
Because Leah was ugly, huh? Well, it doesn't say ugly. It says she had weak eyes. Which I've always thought was puzzling because you could see that with a veil on. Leah was not as attractive as her sister Rachel. And
well, that wasn't the deal. When you made a deal and you got tricked.
right, the deal was I want Rachel, right? And he didn't get it. He got somebody else, and so he was upset about it. Oh, well, you can't marry the youngest one off first. Well, who says that necessarily? So we'll get to that story. But it was, do looks have anything to do with the attractiveness of a mate? Or yes, of course they do. Don't stand up here like some preachers do and say looks have nothing to do with it. Of course they do. Did in Bible times. But there's somebody for everybody. Okay? And just because you don't like their looks, somebody else will. And some people had to be content with the leftovers. Well, now look, seriously, this isn't part of God's plan necessarily, but who has the better looking children? As often as not, it's the ugly ones. Okay? So, we met a couple. I was telling somebody this story this week. I was traveling through Tennessee, many years ago, on a Sunday night. And I went to this little church, and I had mutual friends there, and they asked me to preach on a Sunday night. So I preached. And afterwards, we're standing around talking to everybody on the porch, like you do. And they're talking to this young couple, and they got a couple kids running around there. And we're talking about kids. And so they introduced their two daughters. This is the smart one, and this is the ugly one. Is that right, Judy? Yes. This is the smart one, this is the ugly one. That's how they introduced their daughters. And I really wanted to I already had 5 kids, but I wanted to take the ugly one home with me. Because she wasn't ugly, for one, and she is going to have a tough life in some ways. I imagine if you went there, if you found those 2 women today, my money would be on the fact that the ugly one has much better character and is a better wife than the smart one. That'd be my guess, because of the way that these labels and the way people view themselves determines how they act. And so the pretty blonde girls often are ditzy, except for my wife, but she had a hard life. That nothing is expected of them. The boys, all the athletes who are strong and handsome, have muscles and good looking and play sports. Everybody hands them everything, gives them everything. The way is made easy. Do they develop any character? Oftentimes they don't. That's why we see so much of this in the headlines then, because of the way it is. So don't get caught up in all, but don't call your kids ugly and stupid. It's just an indictment of you, for one thing. I was so upset I could barely speak. I was so angry. Judy was standing there, our jaws were on the floor. And they said it more than once. And I thought, did I just hear what I thought I heard? I did. Anyway, with a smile. So Abraham again took a wife. Her name was Keturah. No stopping this guy. She bore him Zimron, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. People have this notion that if someone marries after they lose a mate, that they don't love the first mate. And that just isn't true. Not in the Bible. It's just not true. Can be true, but it's not necessarily true. There are a lot of reasons why someone would have a second mate. We're warned against doing that in a rash way in the New Testament, but there's nothing wrong with that. And Abraham is an exhibit A of that, has a love for Sarah, but he needed a companion. I think that kind of goes with his personality, for one thing. He was he's kind of a passive person, a quiet person, a passive person. He needed somebody to, be with him, perk him up as a companion. He needed help. He needed something. All right, she bore him, and then he has how many kids? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids or something like that. So, he's an old man. Some have wondered, was Abraham's body dried up as well as Sarah's, and that's why he couldn't have a child when he was 100 years old, because his body was dried up? And then after the Lord corrected this and he had Isaac, his body must have stayed alive because it got 6 more kids. So we're not sure what happened there. I'd just rather think it means that he was old and you wouldn't expect him to bear children. But it's more likely physiologically that Sarah's womb was the one that wasn't able to bear children, and God performed a miracle to cause her to be able to bear a child. Jokshan begat Sheba, which is, we think, their descendants went to Africa, and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan are Asherim, that's the Assyrian, and Letushim and Lemuim. Here's more names for you people looking for baby names. And the sons of Midian are Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. And all these were the children of Keturah. Which one jumps out at you in here? Does one of those names jump out at you? Midian. The Midianites became enemies of Israel. Okay? Later on in history. They were sons of Abraham by his second wife, Keturah. So when you read about the Midianites and Gideon and the Midianites and so forth, you're reading about the descendants of Abraham by Keturah. And I think that's why this is in there, partly. And Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. But he gave gifts to the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had had. And while he was still living, he sent them eastward, away from Isaac, his son, to the country of the east. Here's some more good advice for you as you get older. Take care of your affairs as much as you can before you die. Sometimes you don't have time. Some people just neglect to do that. For whatever reason, they don't think they're going to die, and so they don't prepare. You take care of your children. You get them situated with each other as much as you can, and with the Lord. But he gave everything he had to Isaac as an inheritance, which means that it could grow or shrink before he died. But before he died, at some point before this, he gave gifts to these other sons. He gave them a set amount of money or property that was theirs. He didn't just abandon them. So you go marry a second time, you have to consider the proper way to deal out the inheritance and the possessions, and be fair. Be fair about it all. And a lot of people aren't at all. They just ignore that. They're not fair. They don't want that other woman's kids getting anything, and they don't want anybody else, and it just creates horrendous problems for generations. You isolate those people from each other badly. But Abraham gave them gifts, and he sent them away because he didn't want them, since they weren't heirs, to influence his son badly, the one that was the heir in this case. But he didn't just abandon them. This is something that has to be taken care. This is something that has to be considered carefully in our modern relationship. And we live long like Abraham. We're likely to have another spouse or something, and extra kids. And it's true that when you marry someone who has children already, I've seen people that just want to act like those kids don't exist because now I'm married to this man or this woman, and so the other kids don't exist. The other wife doesn't exist. That's not reality. You're going to pay a price if you aren't fair and just with that, in my opinion. Y'all look like I'm saying something completely off the wall here. Agree or disagree?
Agree. This is true. I've seen that a lot of times in
I
friends and
see it all the
stuff.
time. Yeah,
They
that's
get
right.
adopted children that aren't his or hers. They're just miserable.
Well, children from previous marriages.
That's what I mean. And
That
they just hate
now, and I hate to say this, and I know why, but the woman often wants the wife and the other children from the previous relationship to actually disappear off the face of the earth. If she had a magic eraser, she would erase them all. But you can't ever get rid of people. Even a stillborn child, you can never get rid of that child. I don't care what you do. An abortion, you never get rid of that aborted baby. It'll be with you the rest of your life. You'll have to force it not to exist. Okay? And the same thing too, you cannot get rid of people. They're too important. They're made in the image of God. Can't get rid of them. So you have to deal with them fairly and appropriately. And so this is part of this. And we live with, we're just inundated with this in our culture. And so this is a Bible example of taking care of all of his children. They're different because they had different roles, but they have to be taken care of. All right, sorry I'm yelling at you, but anyway, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. We're going to end our Bible.